Margaret clutched her school bag tightly as she stepped onto the dusty grounds of Breakthrough Girls' School in Icombe. The sun was dipping behind the hills, casting long shadows that danced eerily across the dormitory walls. She had heard stories about the school from her elder cousin, tales of discipline, excellence, but also whispers of strange occurrences at night. "Margaret, Abigail, Vicky," called a cheerful voice from behind. It was Felicia, her roommate, waving enthusiastically. The three girls hugged, relieved to find familiar faces amidst the intimidating environment. The school's main building loomed ahead, its paint chipped in some places, but the majestic veranda and tall windows hinted at its former glory. Yet something about the air felt heavy, almost charged with unspoken secrets. At dinner, the chatter of excited girls filled the hall. Some spoke nervously of night noises, water gushing from the borehole without anyone pumping, shadows gliding past their doors, and most terrifyingly, sightings of Lady Koi Koi, a ghostly figure said to roam the dormitories at night. "I swear I saw her last week," whispered Vicky to Abigail, her eyes wide. "She was just standing outside the window, looking at me." Abigail shivered. Maybe it's just stories to scare new girls. But Margaret wasn't so sure. The air smelled faintly of wet earth and something else she couldn't name, a metallic tang that made her stomach churn. She wondered if she could survive the semester without losing sleep or courage. Later that night, the girls gathered quietly in their dorm room. Felicia, the de facto leader of their little group, pulled out a small packet of sweet biscuits. "I heard from the seniors. If you chew these at night, you can summon your friends for secret meetings. It's fun." Margaret hesitated. Fun? Or dangerous? Felicia grinned mischievously. "It's just a game. Everyone's doing it. You don't want to be left out, do you?" Abigail nodded quickly. "I'll try it too. What harm could it do?" So, the three girls sat in a circle, munching biscuits while whispering charms and promises. The room seemed to grow colder, the shadows longer. Outside, the wind rustled the trees, and somewhere down the hall, water gushed from the borehole without a pump. Margaret felt a chill run down her spine, but the excitement of secret midnight meetings kept her rooted to the spot. The next morning, the dormitory was buzzing with sleepy chatter. Margaret rubbed her eyes, still uneasy from the previous night. The secret biscuit ritual had left a strange taste in her mouth, and the shadows in the corners of the room seemed darker than before. "Did anyone else hear that water again?" Vicky asked quietly as she dressed for assembly. "It sounded like someone was pumping, but I didn't see anyone." Abigail shivered. "I heard it too. It woke me up. And there were footsteps in the corridor. I swear I'm not imagining things." Margaret felt a tight knot in her stomach. "Maybe we should just forget the midnight meetings. This place is weird." Felicia shook her head, a mischievous glint in her eyes. "Come on, it's exciting. Only boring girls don't explore. Besides, the seniors say this is just the beginning. You'll see." During assembly, the principal, a strict woman named Felicia, had not yet arrived, and the school felt untamed. Gossip spread quickly among the girls. Some were adding extra holes to their ears, others applying mysterious powders on their faces after school hours. It was a trend, almost like a silent rebellion against rules that had yet to be enforced. At cross-country practice on Saturday, Breakthrough girls joined the boys from the nearby school for competition. The girls laughed, teasing each other, but Margaret noticed a change in some of them. They were calling the boys "our husbands," giggling and blushing in ways that made her uneasy. Some whispered about giving up their dreams of becoming reverend sisters for the sake of romance and popularity. Margaret wondered how long it would be before the fun turned dangerous. That evening, as darkness settled over the dormitory, the water gushed again from the borehole. This time, the sound was accompanied by faint whispers, like someone calling names. Margaret froze. Across the hall, she thought she saw a shadow move quickly, a figure in flowing white gliding silently. Lady Koi. Her heart thudded painfully in her chest. "Margaret, are you coming?" Felicia's voice broke through her fear. The girl had a daring expression, as if she welcomed the unknown. I don't think I should," Margaret whispered, trembling. Felicia nudged her. "Don't be a scaredy cat. You'll get used to it." But Margaret wasn't so sure. The shadows seemed alive, the air thick with something unnatural. She could almost hear faint laughter, sinister and sweet at the same time, echoing down the hallways. Meanwhile, in one of the hidden corners of the school, older girls were meeting in secret. They were experimenting with charms, powders, and sweets that summoned friends. Margaret lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, unable to sleep. The events of the past week had unsettled her more than she wanted to admit. Outside, the wind whispered through the trees, carrying with it the faint sound of water gushing from the dormitory borehole. She knew she wasn't imagining it. Last night it had happened again, and so many other girls had heard it too. Across the room, Felicia and Abigail giggled softly as they pulled out a small packet of sweet biscuits. "One more night," Felicia whispered. "We just have to see if the summoning works better tonight." Margaret shook her head. "I don't think I should. It feels wrong." "You're no fun," Felicia teased, popping a biscuit into her mouth. "You'll thank me later. Everyone else is doing it. Don't be left out." With a sigh, Margaret reluctantly chewed a biscuit. The room seemed to grow colder, the shadows stretching toward them like dark fingers. They held hands in a circle, whispering the charm softly. Suddenly, a faint breeze swept through the room, despite the windows being closed. The candle flames flickered violently, and a low, mournful groan echoed from the hallway. Abigail gasped. "Did you hear that?" Margaret nodded, heart racing. It's coming from the borehole. Outside their dormitory, the water gushed as if possessed. The noise was deafening, and yet no one was there, no pump, no hand, no explanation. The girls huddled together, fear mingling with excitement. Then, at the corner of her eye, Margaret saw a pale figure gliding across the corridor, the legendary Lady Koi. She froze, unable to look away. Felicia nudged her. "See, I told you it works." Margaret swallowed hard. This isn't fun anymore. Something is here watching us. Suddenly, a loud thump came from the next room. The girls screamed as a shadow darted past their doorway, vanishing into the darkness. The whispers grew louder, and Margaret could swear they were calling her name. She tried to pull away from the circle, but Felicia's grip was firm. "You're not leaving," Felicia said. "We summoned this. We face it together." Margaret wanted to scream, but the words caught in her throat. The air grew heavy, pressing down on them like a living thing. Shadows twisted and writhed across the walls, forming shapes that made their hearts pound. In the corner, something or someone was watching. By the time the candle burned low, the room fell silent. The water in the borehole gushed no more, and the shadows retreated. The girls sat in stunned silence, too frightened to move. Margaret's hand shook as she whispered, We shouldn't have done this. This school, it's not normal." Felicia finally nodded, her eyes wide with a mix of awe and fear. "Yeah, maybe this is more serious than I thought." The following week, Breakthrough Girls' School was alive with energy, but Margaret felt a creeping unease she couldn't shake. The midnight ritual had left her restless, and the whispers of Lady Koi Koi haunted her thoughts. The excitement that once drew her to Felicia and Abigail now felt dangerous, almost magnetic. At breakfast, she noticed Abigail staring at the older girls, wide-eyed and mesmerized. Some had started wearing extra earrings, others applied powders to their faces after school, whispering that it made them irresistible. Margaret frowned. "Do you really think that's necessary?" she asked quietly. Abigail hesitated. I just want to fit in. Everyone's doing it. It's harmless, right?" Margaret shook her head. "I don't know. It feels wrong." Felicia, sitting across the table, smirked. "Wrong. Margaret, it's just a bit of fun. You're letting fear ruin the excitement." But Margaret couldn't ignore the subtle change in the school. The older girls had been subtly influencing the younger ones, guiding them toward indulgence, friendship with boys, and little rebellions that seemed harmless but were slowly changing hearts. Dreams of becoming reverend sisters were whispered about less and less. Ambitions were being replaced with infatuations. That evening, the dormitory felt heavier than usual. Water gushed again from the borehole, but this time it was louder, almost angry. Shadows twisted along the walls, moving closer to rooms where girls had been experimenting with charms and powders. Margaret pulled her blanket closer around her, heart pounding. "Are you okay?" Felicia asked, her usual confidence shaken by the strange noises outside. I don't think this is a game anymore," Margaret whispered. "Something is coming for us. For everyone who's following these rituals." Felicia's eyes widened. "You mean Lady Koi Koi?" "Not just her," Margaret said, voice trembling. "Something bigger. Something awake in this school. The water, the shadows. The way some of the girls are changing. It's like the school itself is alive, feeding off them." Abigail buried her face in her hands. "I don't want to lose myself. But I also don't want to be left out." Margaret squeezed her hand gently. "We have to be careful. We need to watch each other." The three girls sat in silence, listening to the whispers of the night, knowing that temptation and influence were growing stronger. Each secret meeting, each powder, each charm, was a thread pulling them deeper into forces they didn't understand. Monday morning arrived with an unusual stillness. The dormitories, usually buzzing with chatter and secret whispers, were eerily quiet. Rumors had spread overnight. The new principal, Felicia, was arriving. Not the usual strict but lenient figure. They said she was a woman of iron, a stickler for prayer, discipline, and holiness. Margaret felt a shiver run down her spine. She had heard stories of principals so devout that even whispers of mischief trembled before them. As the girls assembled in the main hall, the large doors creaked open, and in walked Felicia. Tall, commanding, and wearing a deep navy dress that hinted at elegance but demanded respect, she scanned the room. Her eyes, sharp and unwavering, swept across every student, lingering briefly on Margaret, Felicia, Abigail, and Vicky. "Good morning," she said firmly, her voice resonating in the hall. "I am Principal Felicia, and I expect nothing less than obedience, respect, and dedication to God in this school. Those who choose otherwise will face the consequences of their actions." The hall was silent, every girl frozen under her gaze. Felicia could feel the restless energy in the school, the invisible forces twisting through the walls and corridors. She had sensed it the moment she stepped onto the grounds, a heavy, unnatural presence that thrived on fear, temptation, and disobedience. During assembly, she raised her hand, commanding attention. "This week, we begin a weekly devotion every Thursday. Attendance is mandatory. All fasting, prayer, and reflection will be observed. Let this be a warning. If you continue to indulge in sinful habits, God's fire will not overlook you, even in the secret corners of this school." Whispers ran through the hall, some girls exchanging nervous glances, others scoffing quietly. Margaret, however, felt a wave of hope. Here was someone who might save them from the darkness creeping silently into their lives. After the assembly, Felicia walked through the dormitories, her steps silent but purposeful. The girls shrank back as she paused near their room. Margaret noticed the faint glow in her eyes, like someone who could see what was hidden in shadows and hearts alike. "Young ladies," Felicia said softly but firmly, "I know there are secrets in this school. Midnight meetings, charms, powders, and forbidden friendships. They will stop now. This school is a place of learning and spiritual growth. Those who resist God's path will be given a choice: repent or leave." Margaret, Abigail, and Vicky exchanged glances. The weight of the words settled heavily on their shoulders. Even Felicia, the daring girl who had laughed at shadows, looked suddenly unsure. That evening, the girls whispered in the dormitory, debating whether to continue their midnight rituals. The gushing water in the borehole seemed louder, angrier, as if sensing a new force challenging it. Margaret felt a stirring of courage. Maybe, just maybe, Principal Felicia could confront the unseen powers and restore Breakthrough Girls' School to safety. But the older girls and the secret groups were not ready to give up. Somewhere in the dark corners, they whispered curses and charms, plotting to resist. And Margaret knew the coming. It was Thursday morning, and the air in Breakthrough Girls' School felt thick with anticipation. Every girl had gathered in the main hall for the first weekly devotion since Principal Felicia's arrival. Margaret, Abigail, Vicky, and even some of the bolder students who had once led the secret midnight rituals sat nervously, sensing the weight of the principal's presence. Felicia stood before them, her hands folded, her gaze piercing. "We begin today not just with prayer, but with accountability," she said, her voice steady and commanding. "I know there are girls in this school dabbling in charms, powders, and secret meetings that call darkness into our midst. This stops now." A ripple of murmurs ran through the hall. Some girls glanced at each other, fear and defiance mixing in their expressions. Margaret noticed the older girls stiffen, as if Felicia's words were striking directly into their hearts. "I will not tolerate rebellion or indulgence in practices that go against God's law," Felicia continued. "If you continue, there will be consequences. Consequences that may strip you of your health, your peace, and your place in this school. Repent now before it is too late." After the assembly, Felicia walked through the dormitories, her steps deliberate. She paused outside a room where whispers and giggles betrayed forbidden activities. With a soft but firm knock, she entered. The older girls froze, their charms and powders spread across the table. "I know what you have been doing," Felicia said calmly. "All of it. I can see the darkness you have invited." and I am here to confront it." One girl, Abigail's cousin, tried to laugh nervously. "It's just fun, Principal. We're not hurting anyone." Felicia's eyes hardened. "Fun? You are endangering your souls. If you refuse to repent, God Himself will remove you from this place. I will pray for deliverance, and if you resist, you will leave this school." A hush fell over the room. Margaret felt a wave of relief, hope, and fear all at once. For the first time, she realized that the games, the sweets, the midnight meetings, everything were not harmless. Felicia was not just a disciplinarian. She was a warrior of faith. That evening, the dormitory was restless. Shadows lingered in the corners, whispering threats, stirring unease. Margaret couldn't sleep, listening to the wind, the trees, and the distant sound of water gushing from the borehole. It felt alive, restless, as if the spirits of the school were testing the new authority. Felicia called the girls to evening prayer in the chapel. "Those who are willing to surrender to God's will, come forward. Those who resist, know that He is stronger than any charm, any spirit, any temptation." One by one, girls stepped forward, some hesitantly, others with tears streaming down their faces. Margaret joined them, holding Abigail's hand, feeling the weight of every wrong choice they had made. By the end of the session, a tangible calm settled over the school. Even the shadows seemed to retreat, the wind outside softened, and the gushing water from the borehole ceased for the first time in many nights. Margaret understood then that Principal Felicia was no ordinary principal. She was a spiritual force, a guardian whose presence alone commanded respect and fear from both the living and the unseen. The battle for Breakthrough Girls' School had begun, and it was clear that no charm, whisper, or midnight ritual could stand against her. But deep in the dark corners, the older girls were already plotting, determined to resist, testing whether their courage or their mischief could survive Felicia's authority. Margaret knew that the coming weeks would demand strength, wisdom, and faith from every girl willing to remain. And she resolved, silently, to walk in the path of righteousness, no matter the cost. The dormitory was unusually silent that evening. Margaret had just finished her study period when a panicked scream shattered the quiet. She bolted upright, heart pounding, as Abigail and Vicky rushed past her toward the corridor. "Someone! Call Principal Felicia!" a girl shouted, her voice trembling. Margaret followed, fear tightening her chest. At the far end of the hall, a junior girl lay on the floor, vomiting blood. Her body convulsed violently, twisting as if she were contorting like a serpent. The older girls, who had once led secret rituals, cowered in fear. Whispers of curses, charms, and midnight meetings spread like wildfire among the gathered students. Felicia arrived moments later, moving swiftly, her face calm but commanding. "Clear the area," she ordered, and the girls scrambled aside, leaving the convulsing girl at the center. Margaret watched as Principal Felicia knelt beside the girl, placing her hands gently on her head. "In the name of God, I bind every evil spirit," she said firmly, her voice steady and unwavering. The room seemed to hold its breath as Felicia began to pray aloud, her words flowing with authority, conviction, and power. The girl's body writhed violently, but slowly, the convulsions began to subside. Her cries turned into sobs, and then into silence. With each prayer, Felicia's presence seemed to push the darkness back, the oppressive air lifting from the dormitory. Margaret felt tears prick her eyes. She's being delivered," she whispered to Abigail, whose hands trembled in relief. The girl, now calmer, opened her eyes wide, terror and relief mingling there. I was feeding another girl blood," she confessed in a trembling voice. I didn't know what I was doing. The sweets, the charms. I thought it was fun. I'm sorry." Felicia nodded solemnly. "You were under the influence of evil forces. But God is greater. He has delivered you. Stand, child, and walk in His light." Margaret realized the severity of what had been happening. The secret midnight rituals, the charms, and the gifts of sweets were not harmless games. They were gateways for dark forces. Principal Felicia's authority and prayers were the only things strong enough to confront them. In the following days, the dormitory slowly returned to a tense calm. Many girls repented, abandoning charms, powders, and secret gatherings. A few, however, refused to change and quietly left the school, their ambitions and friendships sacrificed to their stubbornness. Margaret, Abigail, and Vicky felt a renewed sense of purpose. No longer would they be swayed by peer pressure or supernatural temptations. They watched as Principal Felicia established weekly devotions, fasting, and strict discipline throughout the school. For the first time, Breakthrough Girls' School felt like a place of safety and spiritual growth. Shadows still lingered in hidden corners, whispers still stirred at night, but Margaret understood one truth clearly. No dark force could stand against the power of prayer, faith, and the unwavering authority of a righteous principle. And in that moment, Margaret knew that her choices, her courage, and her faith would shape not only her destiny but the destiny of every girl at Breakthrough Girls' School. The next morning, the air in Breakthrough Girls' School was heavy with anticipation. Margaret, Abigail, and Vicky walked to assembly, noticing the subtle changes. Girls who had once flaunted charms and powders now kept their heads low, avoiding eye contact. Even the older students who had led the secret midnight gatherings seemed uneasy. Principal Felicia stood at the podium, her presence commanding silence immediately. "I have received reports of hidden practices within this school. Rituals, charms, midnight meetings, and what some call the school mother and school daughter system," she said, her voice unwavering. The hall was completely silent, every girl listening intently. Margaret felt her stomach twist. The older girls, who had once whispered about these secret hierarchies and midnight charms, now shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Felicia continued, "These practices are forbidden. They are dangerous and invite forces that corrupt the soul. Starting today, they will cease immediately." After assembly, Felicia walked through the dormitories again, this time accompanied by several staff members. She paused outside a room where whispers and giggles betrayed hidden activity. With a firm knock she entered, her eyes scanning every corner. "Remove all charms, powders, and secret items immediately," she ordered, her voice calm but filled with authority. "There will be no hiding, no excuses. Every girl is accountable for her actions. Those who resist will leave this school." Margaret watched as some of the older girls hesitated, clutching their charms and powders. Felicia knelt before one, placing her hands gently but firmly on her shoulders. "You cannot serve darkness and God at the same time. Surrender or be removed." Slowly, one by one, the girls began handing over their hidden items. Margaret felt a sense of relief and awe. For the first time, she realized the depth of Felicia's spiritual power. This was no ordinary principle. She was a force that could confront and undo decades of dark influence. Even the notorious school mothers and school daughters, who had organized secret meetings, were brought to assembly. Felicia addressed them directly. "Your games, gifts, and charms have no place here. You will end these practices immediately. If not, you will leave this school, and God's judgment will follow you." The girls, previously arrogant and defiant, bowed their heads in submission. Some wept quietly, realizing the harm they had caused. Margaret felt a mix of relief and hope. The atmosphere of fear and supernatural influence was gradually lifting. That night, as Margaret prepared for bed, the dormitory felt different. The water no longer gushed uncontrollably from the borehole. The shadows that had haunted the corners seemed to retreat, as if acknowledging Felicia's authority. Margaret held Abigail's and Vicky's hands. "We're finally safe," she whispered, though a tiny part of her knew the battle wasn't entirely over. Principal Felicia had begun the hard work of cleansing the school, both spiritually and morally. The secret systems, the charms, and the midnight rituals were being dismantled, and the girls were slowly learning to rely on faith, discipline, and prayer instead of dark tricks and peer influence. Margaret looked around the dormitory, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. She knew the weeks ahead would still be challenging, but with Felicia guiding the school, there was hope. For the first time since her arrival at Breakthrough Girls' School, Margaret truly believed that change was possible, and that light could conquer even the darkest shadows. The following week, an unusual tension filled the corridors of Breakthrough Girls' School. While many girls had submitted to Principal Felicia's authority, a small group of older students remained defiant. They whispered in corners, plotting how to resist the rules, continue their secret meetings, and reclaim their influence over the younger girls. Margaret, Abigail, and Vicky noticed it immediately. One evening, as they returned from the dining hall, they overheard Vicky's friend, Chinyere, speaking in a hushed tone to two others. "We can't just give up everything. Felicia thinks she can scare us with prayers and devotion, but we know better. We'll meet tonight anyway." Margaret's heart raced. "Chinyere, do you realize what you're doing? You saw what happened to that girl. The vomiting, the spirits, the danger." Chinyere smirked. "Danger? That was her problem, not ours. We're stronger. Felicia doesn't scare me." The girls parted ways, but Margaret's unease lingered. That night, as the dormitory lights dimmed, Margaret lay awake, listening. From down the corridor, she heard faint giggles and whispers, then the unmistakable sound of the water gushing from the borehole. It had returned, louder and more urgent than before, accompanied by faint, eerie laughter. Felicia, however, was not unaware. The next morning, she called the girls to assembly. Her eyes, sharp as ever, swept the room. "I know some of you tried to resist," she said firmly. "You think secret meetings, charms, and powders can protect you. You are wrong. Every dark act has consequences. You will be held accountable." Chinyere and her friends exchanged glances but said nothing, a flicker of fear crossing their faces. Felicia continued, "Tonight, I will pray in every dormitory for deliverance. Every girl hiding in darkness will be given a choice: repent or leave this school." That evening, Margaret, Abigail, and Vicky joined Felicia in the chapel. The air was thick with tension. Candles flickered, casting long shadows across the walls. Felicia knelt and began to pray, her voice strong and unwavering. Margaret felt the atmosphere shift, heavier, darker, as though the very walls of the school resisted her presence. Outside the chapel, Chinyere and her friends had gathered in secret, attempting to continue their rituals. But the moment Felicia's prayers intensified, they felt a pressure on their chests, a burning sensation in their hearts. Fear rooted them to the spot. One by one, the girls dropped the charms, the powders, and the sweet packets, unable to withstand the spiritual force radiating from Principal Felicia. By midnight, the dormitories were silent, the gushing water from the borehole ceased, and even the shadows seemed to retreat. Margaret, trembling but relieved, whispered to Abigail, She's stronger than we imagined." Abigail nodded. "I never want to see those rituals again. Felicia, she's not just a principal. She's like a shield over us." Margaret agreed silently. The first clash had ended, but she knew the battle between faith and defiance would continue. Yet, with Principal Felicia leading them, the school was finally turning from a place of fear and temptation into a haven of discipline, prayer, and hope. Thursday arrived, and the sun barely peeked over the hills before the girls were summoned to assembly. Breakthrough Girls' School had changed noticeably since Principal Felicia's arrival. Some older girls still whispered behind doors, but the majority now walked with heads bowed in quiet reflection, aware of the consequences of rebellion. Margaret, Abigail, and Vicky joined their classmates in the main hall. Candles flickered along the edges, creating a solemn, almost sacred atmosphere. Felicia stood at the podium, her presence commanding immediate attention. "Today begins our first official weekly devotion and fast," she announced. "You will pray, you will repent, and you will surrender. Anything less is unacceptable." The girls exchanged nervous glances. Even those who had not engaged in rituals felt a shiver of fear. Margaret, holding Abigail's hand, whispered, "I never realized prayer could feel this powerful." After assembly, Felicia led them to the chapel. The air was thick and heavy, almost alive. She began to pray aloud, her words echoing through the high ceilings, each syllable cutting through fear, temptation, and darkness. Margaret noticed that as Felicia prayed, even the shadows in the corners seemed to shrink, retreating from the warmth of her authority. Some girls, trembling, stepped forward to confess their involvement in secret rituals, charms, and midnight meetings. One by one, they handed over powders, sweet packets, and small trinkets. Tears streamed down their faces as Felicia prayed over them, calling on God to cleanse, heal, and deliver. Margaret watched in awe as a few older girls, once leaders of the secret practices, began to shake uncontrollably. Felicia's voice rose with authority, guiding them through deliverance prayers. Slowly, the fear, the compulsion, and the influence of dark forces lifted from their bodies. The girls collapsed to the floor, sobbing, exhausted but freed from invisible chains. By the end of the session, the chapel was filled with a quiet, peaceful energy. The oppressive feeling that had haunted the dormitories, the gushing water, the restless shadows, the whispers of Lady Koi Koi, was gone, at least for now. Margaret felt her heart lighten, hope replacing the fear that had gripped her for weeks. Later that evening in the dormitory, Abigail whispered, "I think we're finally safe. The water didn't gush tonight, and the shadows are different." Margaret nodded. "Felicia's prayers are stronger than anything the rituals could summon. We can finally focus on our studies and our faith." Even the rebellious girls, who had initially resisted, began to show signs of change. Some quietly left the school, unwilling to surrender, while others surrendered fully, beginning their journey of deliverance. Margaret realized the school was healing, not just spiritually but morally and emotionally. Breakthrough Girls' School was no longer just a place of learning. It was becoming a sanctuary, a place where faith, discipline, and wisdom could flourish. And Margaret knew that under Principal Felicia's unwavering guidance, the school could rise to greatness, free from the shadows and the temptations that had once ruled its halls. The first weekly devotion had ended, but it was only the beginning. A new chapter of hope, faith, and courage had begun for every girl at Breakthrough Girls' School. The following week at Breakthrough Girls' School was noticeably calmer. The dormitories no longer echoed with giggles of secret meetings or whispers of charms. Margaret, Abigail, and Vicky walked through the hallways with a sense of relief and purpose. The oppressive shadows that once lingered in every corner were gone, and even the borehole remained silent. Principal Felicia had intensified her oversight. Every class, corridor, and dormitory was patrolled, not with harshness, but with vigilant care. The older girls who had resisted her authority were either gone or had begun attending devotions and fasting, learning to surrender their pride and temptations. Margaret noticed the change most during study periods. Girls who had once sneaked powders and charms into classrooms now focused on their books, discussing lessons, ambitions, and faith. Even the whispers of "our husbands" from the boys' school had quieted, replaced by respectful friendships and genuine camaraderie. During a Saturday cross-country event, Breakthrough Girls competed against Breakthrough Boys, but the rivalry was healthy and spirited. No charms, no secret meetings, no reckless behavior, just teamwork and effort. Margaret ran beside Abigail, feeling the weight of the past weeks lift with every step. Later, at evening assembly, Felicia addressed the students. "I am proud of those who have surrendered their hearts and minds to God's guidance," she said, her voice steady and commanding. "Those who resisted have left or will leave, but those who remain are building a school that honors learning, faith, and discipline." Margaret felt a warmth in her chest. She looked around at her classmates and saw faces once clouded with fear or temptation now filled with hope and determination. The older girls who had once led secret rituals now guided the younger ones in study groups, prayer circles, and school projects. Even the school mother and school daughter system had disappeared. No longer did gifts of sweets or chewing gum dictate influence or hierarchy. The students were learning the value of honesty, friendship, and God's protection. One afternoon, as Margaret, Abigail, and Vicky walked to the library, they overheard a teacher speaking to a parent on the phone. "Breakthrough Girls' School is changing," the teacher said. "Discipline, prayer, and principal leadership are transforming the girls. Parents can rest assured that their daughters are safe and growing spiritually and academically." Margaret smiled, feeling pride swell in her heart. They had survived the darkness, the whispers, and the midnight rituals. With Felicia guiding them, Breakthrough Girls' School was no longer just a school. It was a place of hope, restoration, and breakthrough. That evening, the dormitory was quiet, peaceful. Margaret looked at Abigail and Vicky, whispering, "We've come a long way. Felicia has truly saved this school." Abigail nodded, tears of gratitude in her eyes. "Yes, she's more than a principal. She's a guardian. And we've learned that faith, courage, and obedience are stronger than any charm or ritual." Margaret realized that the school had not only survived the dark forces, it had grown stronger because of them. The battles, the fears, and the challenges had forged a new spirit among the girls. Breakthrough Girls' School was on the path to becoming the best in Icum, and the students could now hold their heads high with pride. Weeks passed, and Breakthrough Girls' School seemed almost unrecognizable. The dormitories were orderly, prayers were steadfast, and the whispers of charms and midnight meetings had faded into distant memories. Margaret, Abigail, and Vicky had begun to enjoy a sense of normalcy, attending classes, joining study groups, and participating in school activities without fear. But peace rarely lasts without vigilance. One evening, as Margaret returned from the library with Abigail, she noticed a small group of older girls huddled near the edge of the dormitory grounds. Their heads were bowed together, hands moving in secret gestures, and Margaret immediately felt a chill run down her spine. "Do you see that?" Margaret whispered. Abigail nodded, fear flickering in her eyes. "Are they doing it again?" Margaret crept closer and overheard snippets of conversation. "We can't let Felicia control us completely," one whispered. "Tonight we'll bring the charms back. They'll never know." Margaret's heart sank. She knew the dangers. Vomiting, convulsions, shadows, and Lady Koi Koi had all been consequences of these secret rituals. This was not just rebellion. It was a direct invitation to darkness. Without hesitation, Margaret and Abigail ran to Principal Felicia's office, pounding on the door. Felicia, who had been reviewing prayer schedules, opened it immediately, sensing urgency. "Principal, some girls are trying to bring back charms and powders. They're planning a secret ritual tonight." Margaret gasped. Felicia's eyes narrowed, her calm replaced by the intensity of spiritual authority. "Gather the girls in the chapel. Every girl will be present for prayer. Those who resist will leave this school immediately." By the time the older girls arrived, their defiance was met with unwavering authority. Felicia's presence alone seemed to push back the shadows lurking in the corners. "I know your intentions," she said firmly. "You cannot resist God's power and expect freedom. Every charm, every ritual, every sweet used to summon darkness will be destroyed tonight." The girls hesitated, some trembling, some glaring in defiance. Felicia began praying aloud, her voice commanding and full of authority. Margaret and Abigail held hands, feeling the energy of faith pushing against the whispers of temptation. One by one, the charms, powders, and sweets were placed on the floor. Felicia's hands moved over them as she prayed, calling on God to cleanse and deliver the girls. Shadows twisted around the edges of the room, but Felicia's prayers grew stronger, stronger than the forces that had haunted the school for months. Finally, the air grew lighter. The girls who had once tried to resist fell to their knees, tears streaming down their faces. Some confessed their temptations, others repented silently, and all felt the weight of darkness lifting from their lives. Margaret whispered to Abigail, "Felicia, she's unstoppable. No one can challenge her." Abigail nodded, eyes wide with awe. "We're safer for now." But Margaret knew that evil never rests for long. Breakthrough Girls' School had grown stronger under Felicia's guidance, but the school would always be a battleground between faith and temptation. And every girl would have to choose obedience or rebellion, light or darkness. That night, as the dormitory settled into quiet prayer and reflection, Margaret prayed silently for the strength to continue walking in righteousness. She understood that the battles ahead were not over, but with Principal Felicia leading them, there was hope, protection, and the promise of a breakthrough. By midterm, Breakthrough Girls' School was unrecognizable to anyone who had visited just months before. The dormitories were orderly, prayer circles were thriving, and a sense of purpose radiated from the students. Margaret, Abigail, and Vicky noticed that even the quietest girls were participating actively in studies and devotions, a stark contrast to the fear and secrecy that had once dominated their lives. Word of the school's transformation spread quickly through Icom. Parents arrived to inspect classrooms, the dormitories, and even the borehole, which now sat silent and harmless. Many of them were shocked to see a school that had once been infamous for its secret rituals and supernatural disturbances transformed into a disciplined, holy, and academically excellent institution. During one parent-teacher meeting, a mother whispered to another, "I heard the girls were being led astray. But look at them now. They are confident, well-behaved, and focused. Who is responsible for this change?" Margaret, standing near Felicia, overheard the conversation. She smiled and whispered to Abigail, "It's Principal Felicia. She's done everything. Prayers, devotions, fasting, and discipline. She's not just a principal. She's a miracle worker." Indeed, Felicia had worked tirelessly. She introduced weekly devotionals, mandatory fasting days, and spiritual mentorship programs. She personally monitored student behavior, visited dormitories late at night, and prayed over every girl in the school. Even those who had once led secret midnight gatherings were now assisting younger girls with their studies and spiritual guidance. Academic results began to improve noticeably. During a school competition with Breakthrough Boys School, the girls performed brilliantly, not because of charm or tricks, but because of teamwork, discipline, and dedication. Parents and teachers alike applauded their efforts, recognizing the transformation that had taken place. One afternoon, as Margaret and Abigail sat under a mango tree, they watched as younger students helped each other with homework, laughed joyfully, and attended prayer sessions without fear. "It's amazing," Abigail whispered. "I never thought the school could become this pure, focused, and peaceful." Margaret nodded. "Felicia has given us a second chance. She's shown us that faith, courage, and obedience can overcome anything. Even the darkness that haunted our dormitory is gone because of her." Even the girls who had previously resisted eventually joined in the devotions. Some left quietly, unwilling to surrender, but the majority embraced the new culture. The school mother and school daughter system was gone, and gifts of sweets or charms no longer dictated influence or friendships. By the end of the week, a special assembly was called. Felicia addressed the students, staff, and visiting parents. "Breakthrough Girls' School is not just a place for learning," she said, her voice strong and steady. "It is a place for spiritual growth, discipline, and breakthrough. You, the students, have the power to uphold this legacy, and with faith and obedience, you will achieve greatness." The peace at Breakthrough Girls' School seemed unshakable, until one rainy evening when shadows began to stir. Margaret, Abigail, and Vicky were finishing their prayers in the dormitory when a strange chill filled the room. The once silent corridors echoed with soft, eerie whispers, and Margaret's heart pounded with unease. "I hear it too," Vicky whispered, clutching Abigail's hand. "The shadows, they're moving." Margaret nodded, her eyes scanning the corners of the room. Though the girls had learned obedience and faith under Principal Felicia, the lingering traces of the school's dark past seemed determined to resurface. At that moment, a loud, gushing sound erupted from the borehole outside, louder than ever before. Water poured uncontrollably, as if an invisible force was at play. Some girls cried out in fear, while others hid under their blankets, trembling. Margaret could feel the presence of something unseen, something testing the school's newfound faith. Without hesitation, she and Abigail ran to Felicia's office. Felicia, who had sensed the disturbance, was already preparing. "Gather all students in the chapel," she commanded. "No one stays in dormitories tonight. Darkness is testing us, but prayer will be our shield." Within minutes, every girl was seated in the chapel, candles flickering against the heavy storm outside. Felicia's eyes scanned the room, calm but sharp. "This is a test," she said. "Some of you may feel fear. Some may remember old temptations. Do not give in. Trust in God's power, and the darkness will have no hold over you." The storm outside raged. The water in the borehole continued to gush, and shadows twisted against the chapel walls. Felicia began to pray aloud, her voice steady, commanding, and filled with authority. She called on God to bind the spirits, to cleanse the school, and to protect every girl from temptation and harm. Margaret watched in awe as the shadows began to retreat. The gushing water slowed, the whispers faded, and the cold chill lifted from the dormitory. Some girls trembled in relief, while others wept, realizing how close they had come to being overwhelmed by the past. When the prayer session ended, Felicia addressed the students. "Remember, obedience and faith are your shields. Temptation and darkness will always test you, but with prayer and courage, no force, seen or unseen, can harm you." Margaret, Abigail, and Vicky walked back to their dormitory with a renewed sense of purpose. The school was healing, but the shadows reminded them that vigilance was necessary. As they settled into bed, Margaret whispered, "Felicia saved us again. We must always stay strong." Abigail nodded. "Yes, the past may try to return, but we have the faith to fight it." It was an unusually hot afternoon at Breakthrough Girls' School, and a tense silence had settled over the dormitory. Margaret, Abigail, and Vicky were finishing their assignments when a sudden scream tore through the halls. Rushing toward the source, they found a girl writhing violently on the floor. Her eyes rolled wildly, and she convulsed as though possessed. Other students had gathered around, frozen with fear. Margaret's heart pounded. She recognized the signs from past incidents. The girl was under the influence of dark forces. "Call Principal Felicia," Margaret shouted, her voice trembling. Within moments, Felicia arrived, moving with a calm urgency. The convulsions intensified as she knelt beside the girl. "In the name of God, I bind every evil spirit," she commanded, her voice resonating with authority. The room seemed to tremble under the weight of her words. The girl's body twisted like a snake and she screamed, "I was feeding her blood. I couldn't stop." Tears streamed down her face as she confessed, revealing a dark secret of midnight rituals, charms, and forbidden gatherings. Margaret, Abigail, and Vicky watched in awe as Felicia's prayers intensified. She circled the girl, laying her hands firmly on her head and shoulders, speaking in tongues, commanding the spirits to leave. The room filled with a palpable force, pressing out the darkness and replacing it with warmth and light. Slowly, the girl's convulsions began to subside. Her body relaxed, and she lay still, gasping for breath. Felicia looked around at the gathered students. "This is the power of God," she said. "Darkness cannot survive where faith and prayer dwell. You have seen today what happens when you allow evil to take root." The girl, now calmer, wept quietly. I don't want to hurt anyone anymore," she said. "I want to be free." Felicia nodded solemnly. "You are free now. But you must walk in God's light from this day forward. The choices you make will determine your path." Margaret felt a shiver of relief. The school had faced one of its most dangerous threats yet, and under Felicia's guidance, it had survived. Other students who had once toyed with charms and secret rituals now realized the gravity of their actions. That evening, during prayer in the chapel, Felicia addressed the students. "You have witnessed the consequences of darkness. Every charm, every ritual, every act of defiance invites danger. Choose faith, choose obedience, and you will thrive. Reject evil, and your path will be blessed." Margaret, Abigail, and Vicky knelt in silence, reflecting on all they had seen. The school was no longer just a place of learning. It was a battlefield, and Principal Felicia was its unwavering guardian. As they returned to their dormitory, Margaret whispered, "Felicia saved her, and all of us." Abigail nodded, eyes wide with awe. "We've seen real power today. Darkness has no chance where Felicia leads." The days following the dramatic deliverance were filled with reflection and change at Breakthrough Girls' School. Margaret, Abigail, and Vicky noticed a remarkable shift in their classmates. The once secret rituals, charms, and gifts of sweets had begun to disappear. Girls who had once whispered about midnight meetings now prayed openly in the chapel and assisted younger students with their studies. During morning assembly, Principal Felicia addressed the students, her voice steady and firm. "From this day forward, all acts that invite darkness are forbidden," she declared. "No charms, no powders, no secret gifts. You will honor God and respect each other. Those who cannot obey will leave this school." Margaret noticed several older girls fidgeting uncomfortably. They had once clung to their influence, but the power of Felicia's authority and prayers had shown them the danger of their ways. Slowly, one by one, they handed over their hidden charms and sweet packets, some with tears, some with silent resolve. Abigail whispered to Margaret, "It's amazing. Everyone is finally letting go." Margaret nodded. "It feels like the school is finally healing." Afternoons were now devoted to meaningful activities. The students helped each other with schoolwork, engaged in sports, and attended voluntary prayer sessions. The cross-country races on Saturdays became an opportunity for teamwork, not mischief. Breakthrough Girls' School was transforming into a place of discipline, faith, and excellence. Even the younger students, once influenced by secret rituals and charms, now followed the example set by Felicia and their repentant peers. Margaret watched as the school's atmosphere shifted from one of fear and temptation to one of encouragement and mutual respect. One evening, during a chapel session, Felicia spoke softly but with power. "Every gift, every sweet, every charm you bring into this school is a test. Do you honor God, or do you give in to fleeting desires? Your choices define the future of Breakthrough Girls' School." Margaret, Abigail, and Vicky knelt with the other students, feeling the weight of her words. They realized the importance of obedience and faith, understanding that their actions could either uplift or harm the entire school community. In the following weeks, the school continued to flourish. Academic results soared, the girls' conduct improved dramatically, and parents began to visit more often, praising the transformation they witnessed. The fear that had once haunted the dormitories, borehole, and corridors was gone, replaced by an energy of hope and purpose. Margaret whispered to Abigail as they walked to their dormitory, "We'll never go back to those old ways. Felicia has changed everything." Abigail smiled. "Yes, the sweets, the charms, the tricks, they're all gone. And the school is finally safe for all of us." By the start of the new term, Breakthrough Girls' School had gained a reputation that spread far beyond Icom. Parents who had once hesitated to send their daughters to the school now arrived eagerly, hoping to witness the transformation themselves. Margaret, Abigail, and Vicky walked through the campus, noticing the proud smiles on the faces of both students and staff. The dormitories were orderly, the classrooms alive with engaged learning, and the chapel echoed with sincere prayer. Even the borehole, which had once gushed mysteriously and unervingly, now sat quietly, a symbol of the school's regained peace. During a parent-teacher meeting, one mother spoke to a group of visitors. "I couldn't believe it at first," she said. "My daughter used to sneak charms and talk about school mothers and daughters. Now she prays, studies diligently, and even helps younger students. Principal Felicia has saved this school." Margaret overheard the conversation and felt a swell of pride. She whispered to Abigail, "We're finally getting the recognition the school deserves." Academic competitions with other schools further highlighted the transformation. Breakthrough girls consistently outperformed expectations, not because of tricks or rituals, but because of discipline, focus, and teamwork. Even rival schools noticed the change. Students who had once been afraid to challenge the supernatural now competed confidently, guided by faith and mentorship from Felicia. Felicia herself addressed the assembly one morning, her voice steady and inspiring. "Your behavior, your diligence, and your faith are what bring honor to this school. Continue to walk in righteousness, support one another, and uphold the values we practice daily. Breakthrough Girls School will shine because of your efforts and obedience." Margaret and her friends felt a sense of pride that had nothing to do with personal achievement. This pride came from knowing they had been part of a school that overcame darkness, restored order, and inspired faith. They had witnessed firsthand the consequences of disobedience and the rewards of surrendering to guidance. Even the girls who had previously resisted Principal Felicia's authority now fully embraced her leadership. The gifts of sweets, the charms, and the secret rituals had become a distant memory. Instead, they encouraged one another in studies, prayer, and moral integrity. Parents who visited the school for interviews or events could hardly believe the transformation. They spoke with admiration, telling neighbors and friends about the discipline, spiritual growth, and academic excellence their daughters had achieved. One evening, Margaret, Abigail, and Vicky sat under a mango tree, reflecting on all that had happened. "We've come so far," Margaret said quietly. "The school isn't just safe, it's respected now. Everyone knows that." Abigail nodded. "Yes, and it's all because of Felicia. She didn't just stop the darkness. She built a school we can all be proud of." The sun set over the campus, bathing it in golden light. Breakthrough Girls School had risen from fear and temptation into respect, discipline, and spiritual strength. Its reputation in Icom and beyond was no longer tied to whispers and shadows but to faith, excellence, and courage. By the start of the last term, Breakthrough Girls School had transformed completely. The dormitories were calm, the classrooms were lively with learning, and the chapel was filled with devoted students. Margaret, Abigail, and Vicky walked through the hallways with a sense of awe. Every corner of the school radiated discipline, hope, and faith. Despite the transformation, Principal Felicia remained vigilant. She knew that even small temptations could lead to a resurgence of darkness. Every Thursday, the weekly devotion continued, and fasting sessions reminded the students of the importance of obedience and faith. Margaret noticed that even the girls who had been the most rebellious now prayed without hesitation, assisting their classmates with homework, sports, and spiritual guidance. One evening, as the students gathered for prayers, a few girls whispered anxiously about rumors of charms brought by outsiders to influence them. Felicia's eyes scanned the room, sharp and unwavering. "No darkness from outside or inside can touch this school," she declared. "Your faith and obedience are your protection. You must choose to remain in the light." Margaret felt a surge of courage. The school had faced spirits, gushing water from the borehole, Lady Koi Koi, charms and secret rituals. Yet here they were, strong, united, and fearless. During chapel, Felicia led a special prayer session. She circled the room, laying her hands on the students, commanding any remaining forces of darkness to leave. The energy in the room was electric, yet calm, a combination of divine authority and pure faith. One by one, the lingering shadows and temptations dissipated completely. Margaret, watching carefully, noticed the expressions of her classmates change. Fear gave way to relief, defiance gave way to respect, and confusion gave way to clarity. Even those who had resisted previously now knelt humbly, their hearts fully surrendered. Abigail whispered, "It's over. The school is finally free." Vicky nodded, tears of joy glistening in her eyes. "Felicia did it. She's protected every one of us and made us stronger than ever." That evening, the dormitory was peaceful. The gushing borehole was silent, the shadows had vanished, and even the whispers of Lady Koi Koi were gone forever. Breakthrough Girls' School had not only survived the darkness, it had conquered it completely. Parents visiting the school could barely contain their pride. They saw confident, disciplined, and spiritually strong daughters who excelled in academics, sports, and personal integrity. The school had become a model for others, a sanctuary where faith, courage, and obedience guided every action. Margaret reflected quietly, thinking about all they had endured, the secret rituals, the charms, the midnight fears. "We've truly had a breakthrough," she whispered to Abigail. Abigail smiled. "Yes, and we owe it all to Felicia. She didn't just teach us. She protected us, delivered us, and gave us a school we can be proud of." The morning sun shone brightly over Breakthrough Girls' School, painting the campus in gold. Birds chirped, the gardens bloomed, and the once haunted dormitories now radiated peace. Students gathered in the main hall, dressed neatly in their uniforms, ready to celebrate what had been achieved under Principal Felicia's guidance. Margaret, Abigail, and Vicky sat among their classmates, excitement and pride filling the air. The school had not only survived darkness, rituals, and temptation, it had flourished, growing stronger and more respected than ever before. Parents were invited to witness this transformation, eager to see the school their daughters now called home. Felicia stood at the podium, her presence commanding attention. "Today we celebrate not only academic success but spiritual victory," she announced. Breakthrough Girls' School has risen from fear, secrecy, and darkness to faith, courage, and excellence. Every student here has played a part in this achievement. Parents applauded, some wiping tears from their eyes. One mother whispered to another, "Our daughters are safe, disciplined, and strong. We can finally be proud." Margaret glanced around the hall. Girls who had once plotted secret rituals now assisted younger students with their prayers and studies. The school mother and school daughter hierarchy, sweets, charms, and tricks, all were gone. In their place was a culture of respect, faith, and determination. During the ceremony, Felicia called forward students who had shown extraordinary courage and obedience. Margaret, Abigail, and Vicky were recognized for their faithfulness, leadership, and unwavering support of the school's mission. Tears streamed down their faces as they knelt before Felicia, feeling a deep sense of accomplishment. "Breakthrough," Felicia said, her voice resonating through the hall, "is not just a name. It is a principle. It is the courage to reject darkness, the strength to obey, and the faith to trust God even when challenges seem insurmountable." Today, Breakthrough Girls' School stands as a beacon of hope for Icum and beyond. The school choir sang hymns of praise and thanksgiving, echoing through the halls that had once been haunted. Margaret felt the weight of fear, temptation, and uncertainty lift completely from her heart. Breakthrough Girls' School had not only changed their lives, it had changed the destiny of the entire community. Parents left with beaming smiles, speaking proudly to neighbors, friends, and relatives. "Our daughters study here," one father said, "and we know they are growing in faith, wisdom, and discipline." Breakthrough Girls' School is the best in Icum, and we can finally beat our chests in pride. As the day ended, Margaret, Abigail, and Vicky walked through the serene campus, their hearts filled with gratitude. "We've witnessed something amazing," Margaret whispered. Abigail smiled. "Yes. We've seen a school rise from darkness to light, from fear to faith. And Principal Felicia made it all possible." Vicky added, "This is the legacy we will carry forward. We've learned courage, obedience, and faith. Breakthrough isn't just a school, it's a way of life." As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm glow over the campus, Breakthrough Girls' School stood tall, its walls no longer haunted, its students no longer afraid. Under the unwavering leadership of Principal Felicia, it had achieved what many thought impossible: peace, discipline, academic excellence, and spiritual victory. Breakthrough had been achieved. And from that day forward, every girl, parent, and teacher could proudly say, their daughters, their school, and their community were truly blessed.